In the heart of New York City, in a restaurant where fortunes were discussed over champagne, a table remained an enigma. Each night, the world's most reclusive billionaire, Alexei Bullock, sat in absolute silence. He never finished his meal, never uttered a word, and each night he left behind a perfect, invaluable miniature egg, generating whispers among the city's elite. The media called him a ghost, an oligarch losing his mind. His rivals saw him as a wounded animal ready for devouring. Everyone thought they knew his story, but they knew nothing. And no one could have predicted the key to unlocking this broken man's soul was not a psychologist or a business associate, but a 24-year-old waitress with tired eyes and a secret of her own. The Aiden Luciel, a Michelin-starred sanctuary nestled in Manhattan, was laden with the scent of money and truffles. Conversations murmured, deals sealed with the subtle clink of crystal glasses, and staff moved with the silent, rehearsed grace of ballet dancers. Yet every evening at 8 o'clock, sharp a different performance began, one that silenced even the loudest patrons. It was when Alexei Bullock arrived. He wasn't just rich, he was a ghost, a myth whispered in trading rooms from New York to Hong Kong. The head of Bullock Industries, a vast empire of rare earth minerals and cutting-edge technology, was a man who could move global markets with one rumored phone call. The financial press had dubbed him the Siberian Wolf, a predator who had emerged from post-Soviet chaos with an empire and an impenetrable armor of cold indifference. He was rarely photographed, never interviewed. His sole public appearance was this nightly ritual. His bodyguard, a mountain of a man named Ivan, with a face like granite, entered first, scanning the room with eyes that missed nothing. He nodded once to Maitre de Julien, who knew the procedure by heart. Table 12 in the farthest corner was always waiting. Then Alexei entered, tall and stern, with sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of a winter storm. He moved with an unsettling stillness. He wore tailored suits that seemed to absorb light around him, making him appear darker, more substantial than anyone else in the room. He sat, unfolded his napkin, and gazed out the panoramic window at the Manhattan skyline, his expression a perfect, unreadable mask. The order was always the same, he never spoke it. Julian simply nodded to the kitchen, and a single bowl of deep red borscht with black bread was brought. Alexei lifted the spoon, took exactly 3 sips, then put it down. He broke a small piece of bread, but never ate it. For the next hour, he sat in absolute, unsettling silence with his food cooling in front of him. The staff had a running bet on whether he would ever finish the bowl. No one had ever won, but the real mystery, the part that fueled gossip columns and baffled the city's elite, came at the end. After an hour passed, Alexei reached into his breast pocket and placed a small, exquisitely crafted object on the white tablecloth next to his untouched plate. It was always a miniature egg, no larger than a quail's, made of enamel, precious metals, and tiny jewels. Each night, a different design, one shimmering with sapphire blue and diamond stars, another a delicate rose gold filigree. Then he stood, and without a glance back, walked out. Ivan paid the bill in cash, always with a tip that could cover a junior waiter's rent for 3 months, and followed him into the night. The eggs were collected by Julian and stored in a safe. They were rumored to be miniature replicas of the legendary imperial eggs created by the House of Fabergé for Russian czars. Each was a masterpiece worth a small fortune. No one knew why he left them. It was a show of obscene wealth, a sign of eccentricity bordering on madness. His business rivals, like notoriously aggressive American hedge fund manager Andrew Paul, saw it as proof that the great Alexei Bullock was finally cracking under pressure. Paul's firm, Apex City Securities, had circled Bullock Industries for months, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "He's gone insane," Paul scoffed to his associates. "The man is having a public meltdown. Time to put the wolf out of his misery." Luciel's staff simply saw it as part of the job. They cleaned the table, collected the egg, and reset for the next day, never daring to ask questions. To them, Alexei Bullock wasn't a man, but a strange, lucrative phenomenon, a ghost who paid his bills. No one saw the deep, suffocating pain that drove him. No one could. They had no idea this silent ritual was the only thing holding him together. And they certainly didn't know the only person in all of New York City who held the key to his silent world was about to start her shift. Camilla Jensen tied the knot of her impeccable black apron and took a studied breath. The reflection in the polished steel of the kitchen door showed a young woman with fatigue hidden in the corners of her intelligent blue eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe bun, a marked contrast to the cascade of curls she preferred on her days off. At 24, she felt closer to 40. Camilla was not destined to be a waitress. By passion and education, she was an art historian. Her mind was a library filled with Monet's brushstrokes, Goya's anguish, and the opulent secrets of the Russian imperial court. Her master's thesis, half finished on her laptop in her small apartment, was a deep dive into the symbolic language of Peter Carl Fabergé's work for Tsar Nicholas II and his family. She could tell the story behind each diamond, the meaning of each enameled flower, but passion didn't pay New York City rent or the mountain of student debt she'd accumulated. So at night, she exchanged her textbooks for a tray and her academic analysis for taking orders for overpriced sea bass. Lucielle was an elite post, the kind of job that could pay off her debts in a few years, and she could endure the demanding clientele and crushing hours. In her third week, she was finally deemed competent enough to wait tables in the main dining room. Julian, the manager, pulled her aside, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Under table 12, he said, his eyes flicking to the empty corner, and "It's Mr. Bullock's table. Your job is to be invisible. You deliver the borscht, you clear it. You don't speak unless spoken to, which he won't. No eye contact, no reactions to anything. Are we clear?" "Perfectly," said Camilla, her voice betraying nothing of the curiosity burning within her. She had already heard the whispers, the legends of the silent Russian billionaire and his strange nightly offering. That evening she watched the ritual unfold, the bodyguard's arrival, the entrance of the man who seemed to carry his own personal winter around him. She watched him sit, his face a stone mask. When the order was ready, she carried the heavy porcelain bowl with steady hands, her heart beating a nervous rhythm against her ribs. As she placed the bowl on the table, her professional training took over. She was silent, efficient, invisible, but couldn't help stealing a glance. His eyes weren't focused on the Manhattan skyline. She realized they were unfocused, looking inward, lost in a landscape no one else could see. There was no arrogance in his posture, no sense of power. There was only a void so profound it felt like a physical force. It wasn't coldness. It was the absolute zero of pain. An hour later, as instructed, she watched from afar as he placed the small, glistening object on the table and left. After he even had paid the bill, Julian nodded. "Clean table 12, Camilla." With a sense of dread, she approached. There, beside the cold soup, lay the egg. It wasn't just a pretty ornament. Camilla's breath caught in her throat. Her academic mind, the part of her truly alive, instantly took over. It was an exquisite replica of the lily of the valley, one of the most famous imperial eggs. She knew its history intimately. It was a gift from Tsar Nicholas I to his wife, Empress Alexandra Fyodorovna, in 1898. The original, crafted in pink enamel and pearls, was a celebration of their love and young daughters. The lilies, symbols of purity and innocence, were a tribute to them. Portraits of the Tsar and his two eldest daughters, Olga and Tatiana, would emerge from the top by turning a button. It was a masterpiece, not of wealth, but of love, of family. Camilla looked at the miniature. The detail was perfect, the tiny seed pearls, the faint blush of the enamel. This wasn't a random display of opulence. It was a message, a story, and suddenly, Alexei Bullock wasn't the Siberian wolf. He was a man leaving a symbol of profound domestic happiness on an empty table for one. That night, Camilla didn't sleep. She went home and dug up her research. She avoided sensationalist articles from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal and plunged into obscure archives. It took hours chasing whispers and dead ends, but she finally found it. A small overlooked article from a Swiss newspaper dated 7 years prior. The headline was simple: "Tragedy on Lake Geneva." The story detailed a horrible car accident on a winding mountain road. A limousine skidded on black ice and plunged into the ravine. Among the victims were Elena Bullock, 34, and their 8-year-old daughter, Anna Bullock. The sole survivor, rescued from the wreckage with critical injuries, was the husband and father, Alexei Bullock. The article included a small, grainy photo. It was of a smiling Alexei, years younger, with his arm around a beautiful, kind-eyed woman. Before them was a small girl with a bright, toothless smile, holding a picture book. Camilla zoomed in on the book's cover. It was a children's book about the treasures of the Russian Tsars. Camilla leaned back. The laptop's glare lit her face. Everything clicked with sickening, heartbreaking clarity. The borscht, a taste of home, of childhood, the silence, the sound of a world without their voices, and the eggs. The eggs were for Anna, his little girl, who loved stories of the Tsars. This wasn't a ritual of madness, it was a ritual of remembrance. A desperate nightly attempt to dine with his family. Camilla's heart ached. The mystery was solved, but the truth was a far heavier weight than any puzzle. Now she understood the Russian billionaire, but what could she, a waitress, do with such a devastating truth? For the next 2 weeks, Camilla attended Table 12 with a painful new understanding. She was no longer just a waitress delivering a bowl of soup. She felt like a silent accomplice to a man's private memorial. The other servers saw a cold, eccentric billionaire. Camilla saw a grieving father, a widower lost in silent, endless conversation with ghosts. She watched him with a heavy heart. She saw the minute flicker of pain in his eyes as he gazed at the empty chair opposite him. She saw how his hand resting on the table sometimes clenched into a fist, knuckles white with tension. The nightly egg he left was no longer a curiosity. It was a testament. One night was a replica of the coronation egg celebrating a legacy. The next, the rosebud egg, a symbol of new love. Each told a piece of the story she now knew. Her knowledge became a burden. The professional distance she was supposed to maintain felt cruel. To treat him like just another customer, to be invisible, as Julian had instructed, felt like a betrayal of the profound grief she was now witnessing. She felt an overwhelming urge to let him know he wasn't just a ghost, that someone somewhere understood the language he was speaking, but what could she say? "My condolences on the loss of your family 7 years ago." It was unthinkable, intrusive. He was a powerful private man, guarded by a human fortress named Ivan. A single misstep could cost her the job she desperately needed. The internal battle raged within her. Her cautious, pragmatic side screamed at her to leave him alone, to just do her job. But the art historian in her, the part that believed in the power of symbols and stories to connect human souls, urged her to take the risk. He was speaking in a language of art and history. It was a language she spoke fluently. Perhaps she was the only person in his world who did. The tipping point came on a Tuesday night. It was a dreary, rain-swept evening in New York City. Alexei seemed even emptier than usual, the shadows under his eyes darker, his stillness more pronounced. When the time came, he placed the egg on the table. It was a beautiful and heartbreaking choice, a replica of the pelican egg. In an act of maternal love, the mother pelican, on the top of the egg, would spread her wings to reveal a series of miniature portraits. It was a powerful symbol of sacrifice and parental devotion. Seeing it, Camilla made her decision. Fear warred with empathy, but empathy won. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drum of terror and resolve. This could go horribly wrong. It could get her fired. He could look right through her, or maybe, just maybe, he could feel seen. As he stood to leave, pushing his chair back with a soft scrape, Camilla moved. She didn't walk towards him, but subtly positioned herself in his path to the exit, holding a silver tray as a prop. Even, ever watchful, immediately tensed, his hand moving inside his jacket. Alexei's gaze was fixed on the floor, ready to pass by her like another piece of restaurant furniture. Camilla's voice was low, barely a whisper, but it cut through the ambient restaurant noise like a shard of glass. She didn't look at him, but at the empty table. "The pelican egg," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "A beautiful choice. The artist, Mikhail Perkin, designed it to symbolize selfless parental love." The world seemed to stop. Alexei froze mid-stride. It was as if she had uttered a word in a long-dead language that only he remembered. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his head. For the first time, his stormy gray eyes didn't cut through her, but looked directly at her. The mask of indifference didn't just crack, it shattered. In its place was a raw, naked shock, followed by a wave of confusion and a flicker of something she couldn't name. Pain, hope. Ivan took a half-step forward, his expression thunderous. "Mr. Bullock is leaving," but Alexei held up a single, almost imperceptible hand, and Ivan stopped. The billionaire's gaze remained fixed on Camilla, the silence stretched thick and heavy. Patrons at nearby tables, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, quieted. Julian across the room looked on with a horrified expression. Finally, a voice hoarse with disuse spoke. It was deeper and softer than Camilla had imagined. "How?" The single word carried the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions. "How do you know that?" Camilla finally met his gaze, her own eyes filled with a sad, simple honesty. "My master's is in Russian decorative arts," she said softly. "Fabergé is my specialty." The pelican egg was for the Dowager Empress to remind her of her role in the charities she sponsored, a mother to her people. She paused, taking the final terrifying leap. A symbol of a father's unending love. A tremor ran through Alexei Bullock's powerful body. For a fleeting second, the composure he had maintained for 7 years crumbled, and the lonely, heartbroken man underneath was visible to the world. He swallowed hard, his throat working. "What is your name?" His voice tight. "Camila. Camila Jensen." He nodded slowly, as if engraving the name into memory. He looked from her to the table and back. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Yvonne followed close behind, casting one last bewildered glance at the waitress who had just done the impossible. Camila remained rooted to the spot, the silver tray trembling in her hands. She had uttered a single sentence, and in doing so had changed everything. The next night, an unsettling tension hung over Luciel. Julian, the manager, cornered Camilla before her shift. "I don't know what you did, Ms. Jensen," he hissed, his face pale with anxiety. "But you broke every rule. Mr. Bullock is our most important client. If he doesn't return or if he complains, you're finished." Camilla could only nod, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She had replayed the encounter 100 times in her mind, a pendulum of thought swinging between "I did the right thing" and "I've made a terrible mistake." At 8 p.m., the restaurant held its breath. Julian wrung his hands. Then, right on time, the towering figure of Ivan appeared at the door, followed by Alexei Bullock. A collective, silent sigh of relief swept through the staff. Alexei took his seat at table 12. But this time something was different. He didn't stare out the window. His gaze roamed the room before settling for just a moment on Camila. It was a brief look of recognition, but it held a new awareness. When she brought the borscht, her hands trembled. She placed it without a word, adhering to the rules, but as she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Ms. Jensen." She turned back. "Yes, Mr. Bullock." "Stay," he said. It wasn't a request, but a quiet, simple command. He gestured to the empty chair across from him. Camila froze. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Julian frantically shaking his head, his expression pure panic. Sitting with a patron was a fireable offense of the highest order. But refusing Alexei Bullock felt like a far greater transgression. Looking into his expectant, lonely eyes, she made her choice, pulled out the chair, and sat, her waitress apron feeling like a ridiculous costume. For a long moment, they sat in silence. He didn't touch his soup. "The eggs," he finally said, his voice low and gravelly. "You know them all." "I know their history," she corrected softly. "They are stories." He nodded, looking at his hands. "My daughter Anna loves stories. We had a book, we read it together every night. She would point to the pictures. She would ask me to tell her about the Zir and his children. She dreamed of seeing them." Camilla's heart ached. She listened not as a waitress, not even as an art historian, but simply as a fellow human being. She didn't offer empty platitudes like, "I'm sorry for your loss." Instead, she offered the only thing she could, a shared language. "The standard yacht egg," she said softly. She liked that one, with the miniature gold replica of the imperial yacht sailing on crystal waves. A world in a bottle. Alexei's eyes widened, a flicker of a long-extinguished light returning to them. "Yes," he breathed. "She called it the magic boat egg. She wondered if we could build a boat like that." He paused, a ghost of a smile touching his lips for the first time. "I told her we would." The dam of his 7-year silence had been breached. The stories held so long began to flow, not in a torrent, but in a slow, painful trickle. Over the next few nights, the ritual changed. Camila would bring the borscht, then at his silent invitation, he would tell her about Anna. He would tell her how borscht was her favorite meal, how his wife Elena would make it on Sundays, the whole apartment smelling of beets and dill. He wasn't eating the soup at the restaurant, he was trying to taste a memory. He would place the nightly egg on the table, and it would become their starting point. With the Romanov tercentenary egg, he spoke of Anna's fascination with history, how she pretended to be Grand Duchess Anastasia, hiding from her enemies. With the frosted winter egg, studded with platinum and diamonds, he recounted a story of catching snowflakes on their tongues during a rare Moscow snowfall. Camilla, in turn, shared her knowledge, giving him context, historical notes that enriched his memories. She explained the symbolism he might have missed, the intricate work of the artisans, the private jokes and hidden messages within the enameled shells. For the first time since the accident, Alexei wasn't just remembering his family. He was actively interacting with their memory in a way that felt constructive, not just painful. He was sharing them. Their conversations were a strange and beautiful tapestry woven of a billionaire's private grief and a student's academic passion. He began to ask about her, why Fabergé, what were her dream. He listened with an intensity few people had ever shown her. He saw past the apron to the sharp, empathetic mind beneath. One evening, he was quieter than usual. He pushed the uneaten soup bowl aside and looked at her, his eyes clear and direct. "They think I am weak," he said, the statement hanging in the air. "My competitors, the board, they see this ritual and they see a man who has lost his mind. What they see is a man speaking a language they don't understand," Camilla responded softly. He considered her words. "And you, Ms. Jensen, what do you see?" Camilla met his gaze without faltering. "I see a father who refuses to let the memory of his daughter fade into silence." A profound stillness settled over the table. Alexei Bullock, the Siberian wolf, the man who moved markets and intimidated governments, looked at the 24-year-old waitress and nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. He was understood. In the quiet, expensive air of Luciel, a fragile, improbable friendship had taken root. But outside, in the ruthless world of international finance, the true wolves were beginning to circle, smelling the blood of a man they believed had finally lost his way. The whispers, which had been confined to gossip columns, began to solidify into front-page headlines in the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal. Andrew Paul, the sharp-fanged CEO of Apex City Securities, had made his move. He launched a bold, brutally public hostile takeover bid for Bullock Industries. Paul was everything Alexei was not: loud, ostentatious, and media-savvy. He gave interviews on CNBC, his confident Ivy League accent dripping false concern for Bullock Industries shareholders. "We have a fiduciary duty to act," Paul declared. Alexei Bullock is a brilliant man, a legend, but legends fade. The company is adrift, rudderless, while its leader engages in, well, eccentric behavior, an empty chair at board meetings, a full one at a restaurant every night. Shareholders deserve a leader who is present, focused, and mentally sound. Paul's strategy was insidious. He wasn't just attacking the company's stock price. He was attacking Alexei's character, using his grief as a weapon. Anonymous sources, likely board members swayed by Paul, began to leak stories to the press. They spoke of Alexei's reclusiveness, his blank stares in meetings, his refusal to engage in new ventures, and of course they spoke of the nightly ritual at Luciel, framing it not as a memorial but as the bizarre obsession of a disturbed mind. A photo, clearly taken on a hidden camera phone, appeared online. Alexei sitting alone at his table, the cold soup before him, his expression lost and empty. The caption read, "The Billionaire's Last Supper." The attack was having its desired effect. Bullock Industries' stock price began to slide. Investors grew nervous. Board members, once fiercely loyal to the man who had made them all rich, began to waver. They respected Alexei, but business was business. Paul was offering them a generous buyout, a golden parachute from what looked like a sinking ship. An emergency board meeting was called to vote on Apex's offer. Alexei felt the walls closing in. The fragile peace he had begun to build with Camilla started to crumble under the immense pressure. He retreated back into himself. The stories he shared grew fewer, his silences longer. The light that had rekindled in his eyes began to dim once more. He saw the company he had built, the legacy he had planned to leave for Anna, being ripped from him by vultures who were desecrating his mourning. One evening at the restaurant, he was visibly shaken. He barely looked at Camilla when she sat. "They are winning," his voice flat and defeated. "They are using my love for my family to destroy everything I built for them." He gestured dismissively toward the borscht. "Paul is right. This is the behavior of a fool." "No," Camilla said, her voice firm, cutting through his despair. "It's the behavior of a father. You cannot let him define what this means." "He already has," Alexei shot back, a flash of his old cold anger returning. "The board will vote in 2 weeks. They will side with him. It's over. He will dismantle the company for parts and sell them off. My legacy, our legacy, will be nothing but a footnote in a quarterly report." He seemed utterly broken. The powerful Siberian wolf was gone, and in his place was a man drowning in a sea of loss, the sharks circling ever closer. He seemed ready to let the current carry him, to surrender in the fight. Camilla watched him, her mind racing. She had entered his world and offered him a moment of understanding, a brief respite from his loneliness. But now, that wasn't enough. Sympathy wouldn't save his company. Listening wouldn't defeat Andrew Paul. She thought of the stories he had told her of the fierce, brilliant little girl named Anna, who dreamed of magic boats and czarist histories. What did that girl want her father to do? Did she want him to give up, or would she want him to fight? Camila looked at the powerful, defeated man across the table and realized her role in the story had to change. She could no longer be a passive listener, a gentle confidant. She had to be more. He had allowed her to understand his past. Now she had to help him fight for his future. The waitress had offered him comfort. The art historian, she realized, could offer him a weapon. The silence that followed Alexei's departure from the restaurant that night was heavier than any he had left in his wake. Camilla stood by the table, looking at the untouched bowl of borscht and the exquisite miniature egg he had left beside it. A replica of the Tsarevich egg, crafted for Empress Alexandra to celebrate the birth of her long-awaited son, a symbol of a fragile, precious future. But tonight, it felt like an offering of surrender. His words, "It's over," echoed in her mind, flat and final. He gave up the future he was surrendering. Anna's legacy, the empire built in her name, all to be devoured by Andrew Paul's cynical opportunism. A cold resolve settled over Camilla. For weeks, she had been a confidant, a safe harbor where he could speak the language of his grief. She had offered him the comfort of being understood, but comfort was a luxury. Now what he needed was a weapon. Empathy wouldn't win a boardroom war. She realized with chilling clarity that her role had to evolve. The listening waitress had to become the acting strategist. She wouldn't let the memory of that fierce little girl who loved stories be erased by a man who only understood numbers. Camila called Julian the next morning and told him she was sick, a lie that tasted like ash in her mouth, but born of desperate necessity. For the next 48 hours, her small New York City apartment transformed into a war room. The floor and table were buried under an avalanche of books. Her familiar, cherished texts on Russian history and Fabergé were now juxtaposed with printouts of Financial Times articles on corporate governance and case studies of famous hostile takeovers. Fueled by endless cups of tea, she dissected Paul's strategy. It was brutally simple. He was using Alexei's humanity against him. He had taken Alexei's deepest act of love and successfully branded it as a pathology, a symptom of corporate decay. Paul was fighting on a battlefield of perception. To fight back, Camila knew they couldn't simply refute the perception. They had to create a new one, something so powerful and authentic it would make Paul's narrative seem cheap and hollow by comparison. Her eyes kept returning to the books on Fabergé. Why had the czars commissioned these eggs? They weren't mere trinkets. They were complex instruments of legacy, personal messages of love and faith that also served as public declarations of the dynasty's stability and divine right. They were intimate and imperial all at once. And then the idea struck her, a spark that quickly ignited into a roaring blaze of inspiration. Paul was framing the ritual as a private obsession. The answer wasn't to hide it, but to make it profoundly, powerfully public, to take the intimate core of Alexei's grief, his love for Anna, and transform it into a statement of imperial-scale purpose. Legacy. The word pulsed in her mind. Not a legacy from the past, but a living, breathing one for the future, a foundation. She began to write, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The plan that emerged was audacious, a high-stakes act of emotional and corporate jujitsu. It used the very weight of Paul's attack to unbalance him. It didn't deny the grief. It enshrined it at the very heart of the company's identity. On the third morning, armed with a thin folder containing her proposal and a conviction that burned away all fear, she put on the most professional dress she owned and took the subway to Canary Wharf. Bullock Industries Tower loomed over her, a fortress of glass and steel, and for a moment her resolve wavered. She was a waitress about to storm the castle. Her first obstacle was the human equivalent of a fortress wall. Ivan met her in the lobby after she was predictably turned away at reception. His expression was a mix of confusion and stern disapproval. "Ms. Jensen," he rumbled, his voice a low growl that could stop a charging bull. "This is not a restaurant. Mr. Bullock is not to be disturbed. He is preparing for the board meeting." "That's why I'm here, Ivan," Camilla said, her voice firm, meeting his intimidating gaze. "He's not preparing. He's surrendering. I was with him 2 nights ago. He's given up." Ivan's stony expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, doubt, concern, crossed his eyes. He knew she was right. "His reasons are his own," the bodyguard stated, his loyalty absolute. "I know his reasons," Camilla countered, stepping closer. "And Andrew Paul is twisting them into a weapon to destroy him. You've spent years protecting him from physical threats, Ivan. This is a different threat. It's an attack on his soul. To let him give into it is the same as letting him walk into an ambush. I have a plan, a way to fight back. You have to let me see him." Ivan stared at her, his mind weighing years of protocol against the raw, undeniable sincerity in her eyes. He had seen the subtle shift in his boss since this young woman had started sitting at his table. He had seen the light return, only to be snuffed out by Paul's assault. She wasn't a threat. She was, impossibly, an ally. His duty was to protect Alexei Bullock, and he realized with sudden clarity that protecting him now meant breaking the rules. "Follow me," he said, turning abruptly towards the private elevator. The penthouse office was a breathtaking space, a minimalist cathedral of success with a panoramic view of the city Alexei had conquered. But the man himself seemed oblivious to his kingdom. He stood with his back to them, a dark silhouette against the sprawling urban landscape, his posture radiating a deep, hollow defeat. "Ivan, I told you I wanted to be alone." His voice flat, weary, devoid of its usual authority. "It's me, Mr. Bullock," Camilla said, her voice soft but clear in the vast, silent room. He turned slowly, and the look on his face was a painful mixture of shock, frustration, and a deep, deep weariness. "Camilla, you can't be here. Leave now." "No," she said, her voice gaining strength. She walked past him and laid her folder on the immense, empty desk. "I'm not leaving, because you're standing in the heart of your empire, and you're letting a thief walk in and steal it from you. You're giving up, and I won't stand by and watch you do it." "You don't understand the world you've stepped into," he said with a bitter edge in his voice. "This isn't a history book. It's a Shark Tank." "Then for God's sake, stop bleeding in the water and start acting like the shark everyone believes you are." The words burst from her, sharper and more passionate than she intended. The sheer force of her conviction made him recoil. "Paul isn't attacking your balance sheets," she continued, her voice fast and insistent. "He's attacking your story. He's taking your love for your daughter and calling it madness. So we are going to write a new story, a better one, a true one." She opened the folder. "He calls your ritual an obsession. We will call it the genesis of a foundation. He calls the eggs you leave for Anna meaningless trinkets. We will call them the inspiration for a global legacy. He calls you a man lost in the past. We will show them a man who is harnessing the deepest love of his past to build an unassailable future." Alexei stared at her, a stunned, uncomprehending look in his eyes. He shook his head. "A foundation. Camilla, this is sentimentality. Paul deals in stock prices and power plays." "And we will give him a power play he could never conceive of," she insisted, tapping the proposal. "The Anna Bullock Foundation will be the soul of this company. We will announce it at the emergency board meeting. We will not hide your grief, Alexei. We will turn it into a shield and a sword. You will stand before them and tell them the truth, all of it, and then you will tell them how your love for your daughter has given you a new and greater vision for this company. A vision that invests in the future of the world." A flicker of light, the first spark of intellectual fire she had seen in days, appeared in his stormy gray eyes. He was no longer looking at her as a waitress, but as a strategist. He took the proposal, his hands tracing the logo she had designed. "You're turning his weapon back on them," he murmured, the strategic brilliance dawning on him. "We're changing the battlefield," Camilla confirmed, her voice now calm and certain. "Let Paul fight over stock prices. You will fight for the company's soul. You will offer them a choice not between two CEOs, but between two futures, one of hollow corporate greed and one of deep, lasting purpose. Let's see which one a board of human beings chooses to back." Alexei looked from the papers in his hand to the young woman standing before him, her eyes bright with a fierce, unwavering belief in him. The fog of his despair began to recede, burned away by the heat of her conviction. The broken, grieving father began to recede, and the mind of the Siberian wolf, the empire builder, sprang back to life, seizing this brilliant, unexpected strategy. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips for the first time in a long time. "You are not a waitress, Miss Jensen," he said, his voice imbued with a new wonder and chilling resolve. "No, Mr. Bullock," she responded, a small, triumphant smile playing on her own lips. "I am not." The boardroom on the 80th floor of Bullock Industries Tower was an arena built for titans. A single colossal table of polished obsidian reflected New York City's cold gray sky like a dark, still lake. Seated around it were the board members, a collection of shrewd, calculating minds who had ridden the wave of Alexei Bullock's genius to immense fortunes and who were now ready to abandon him. Their faces were tense, their loyalties fractured. At the far end of the table, holding court, was Andrew Paul, sharp-suited in Italian tailoring. He radiated an almost feral confidence, a shark who had smelled blood and was now circling for the kill. He had spent the morning methodically dismantling Alexei's legacy, using charts and projections to paint a picture of a rudderless company run by a psychologically unstable recluse. He knew he had the votes. The air was charged with the scent of a foregone conclusion. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the opposite end of the room swung open. A collective, almost imperceptible intake of breath swept through the room. Alexei Bullock walked in. This was not the gaunt, broken ghost Paul had described. The weariness was gone from his eyes, replaced by a calm, focused intensity. His shoulders, which had seemed burdened by an invisible weight for years, were now straight and firm. He moved with a quiet, deliberate authority that commanded immediate attention. The Siberian wolf had not come to surrender, he had come to hunt. The board's surprise was compounded by the sight that he was not alone. Walking in his wake, her expression, a mask of serene professionalism, was Camilla Jensen. She was transformed. Gone the waitress's apron, replaced by her impeccable charcoal gray suit, she carried a slim leather portfolio and moved with a quiet confidence that seemed utterly at odds with the woman who served soup. They took their places, Alexei at the head of the table, opposite Paul, and Camilla in the chair directly behind him, an advisor's position. Paul let out a short, contemptuous laugh, unable to resist a jab. "Alexei, I was beginning to think you wouldn't show, and you've brought a friend. How kind. Here for moral support, are we, Miss—" He cut himself off, dismissing her with a wave of his hand. Alexei's gaze, cold as a winter sea, settled on Paul. "Her name is Ms. Jensen, and she is here as the chief architect of this company's future, a future you are not invited to be a part of." He then turned his attention to the board, his voice low but reaching every corner of the silent room. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard Mr. Paul's compelling narrative, a story of decay, of eccentricity, of a leader lost in the past. He has presented you with a picture of me as a broken man, unfit to lead. He is not entirely wrong. I was broken." The admission hung in the air, a startling display of vulnerability. "But where he sees weakness and madness," Alexei continued, "the truth is far simpler, and I owe you all an explanation. Mr. Paul has used my private grief as a corporate weapon, so today I will lay that grief on this table for all to see." For the next 10 minutes, Alexei Bullock did the unthinkable. He stripped away the armor of the ruthless billionaire and revealed the man beneath. With raw, unrelenting honesty, he told them about Elena and Anna. He spoke of their laughter, of their life together, and of the final, blinding horror of the car crash on that icy Swiss road. He spoke of the 7 years of silence that followed, a silence so deep he thought it would swallow him whole. "Mr. Paul is correct when he says I am obsessed," Alexei said, his eyes meeting each board member in turn. "I am obsessed with the memory of my family. My nightly visits to Luciel are not a descent into madness, they are a pilgrimage. It is the only way left for me to dine with my daughter." He explained everything: the borscht, the last meal his wife had promised to make for their little girl, the silence, a space he kept for the voices he longed to hear, and finally, the eggs. Anna loved stories. Her favorite was a book about the imperial Fabergé eggs. They were her treasures, her magic. "Every night I leave a miniature replica on the table. It is not a display of wealth. It is a message in a bottle to my little girl, telling her I remember, telling her I am still her father." The boardroom, a place of ruthless financial logic, was now filled with the sacred weight of a father's sorrow. Sir Richard Jensen, the oldest board member and a man who had known Alexei for 20 years, stared at his hands, a deep sense of shame washing over him for having believed Paul's cynical narrative. Paul, sensing the emotional tide turning against him with catastrophic speed, could no longer stay silent. "This is a deeply moving tragedy, Alexei, truly," he interjected, his voice slick with false sympathy. "But it has absolutely no bearing on quarterly profit margins or our stagnant R&D pipeline. The company needs a leader, not a storyteller." "On the contrary, Andrew," Alexei countered, his voice dropping, turning sharp and cold as steel. "This story is the very foundation of our future. You see, you look at my ritual and you see an end. I have been shown how to see it as a beginning." He nodded to Camilla, who touched a control on the table. The large screen behind Alexei, which Paul had used for his charts and diagrams, sprang to life. It displayed a single elegant logo, stylized A's intertwined, like delicate filigree, on a Fabergé egg. I am officially announcing the formation of the Anna Bullock Foundation, Alexei declared, his voice ringing with a newfound power. A new permanent and irrevocable charter for this corporation. Effective this quarter, 10% of Bullock Industries' net profits will be dedicated to funding its mission, to identify and foster the next generation of brilliant minds in the arts and sciences. We will build research centers, fund scholarships, create a legacy not of minerals and microchips, but of human potential. He gestured with an open hand towards Camilla. This vision required an expert, someone with a unique understanding of how history, art, and legacy intertwine. Ms. Jensen's scholarly work in this field is unparalleled. It was she who showed me that my memories didn't have to be a private sanctuary but could be a public beacon. She has accepted the position of the Foundation's chief director and curator. Her mandate is to turn the profits of this company into an enduring tribute to my daughter's spirit. A wave of audible astonishment swept through the room. This was not the desperate act of a broken man. It was a strategic masterstroke. It was a visionary move that would generate immeasurable global goodwill. It would redefine the company's public image and attract a new level of talent eager to work for a corporation with a soul. It was a move that made Paul's talk of hostile takeovers and asset stripping seem small, greedy, and utterly profane. Alexei Bullock stood at his full height, appearing to dominate the room. "So now you have a choice," he said, his final words falling with the weight of a judge's gavel. "Mr. Paul offers a quick profit, a path of dissection and dissolution. I offer you a purpose, a legacy that will resonate for a century. You can vote to sell off the body of this company to a butcher, or you can vote to reinvest in its soul. The choice is yours." It was a checkmate. Paul's face, moments before so smug, had contorted into a mask of disbelief that quickly turned to pure, helpless rage. He had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered, not by a better financial offer, but by a story he had been too cynical to understand. The vote was a mere formality. One by one, the board members, led by a visibly moved Sir Richard, announced their unwavering support for Alexei. Paul slammed his laptop shut, gathered his papers with trembling hands, and stormed out of the room, without another word, leaving the lingering stench of his defeated ambition behind. Later, as the sun set, casting long golden rays across the New York City skyline, Alexei and Camilla stood before the vast window in his office. The victory was quiet, profound. "What you did today, Camilla," Alexei said, his voice hushed with an emotion that went far beyond gratitude. "You didn't just save my company. You showed me how to stop being a ghost. You gave my daughter's memory a voice the whole world will now hear." Camilla looked out at the sprawling city, a world of infinite stories. "She had the voice all along," she responded softly. "She just needed someone to translate it." Alexei Bullock was no longer the silent man at table 12, and Camilla Jensen was no longer just a waitress. They were partners, architects of a new legacy. Together they had looked into an abyss of grief and had not turned away. Instead, they had built a bridge across it, forged from a father's unbreakable love, and illuminated by the light of a little girl's enduring story. The story of Alexei and Camilla is a powerful reminder that behind every public facade is a private truth. A man the world saw as a cold, broken billionaire was actually a father, consumed by a love that could not die. And the woman who appeared to be just a waitress was the only person with the knowledge and empathy to see the truth. Their story shows us that understanding is a superpower. It proves that the deepest wounds can be transformed into the greatest strengths, and that sometimes the key to saving a life or a legacy is simply taking the time to learn the language of another person's heart. If this story touched you, please take a moment to hit the like button and share it with someone who might appreciate it. These stories of human connection are what we love to tell. To make sure you don't miss our next video, click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. And in the comments below, tell us, have you ever misjudged someone only to find their story was completely different from what you imagined? We'd love to hear it.